Oh, wow. That's I don't know, it's just been sitting there for 2 months now.
Okay, all right, we're live on YouTube. I'll get started with the introductory remarks. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for being here. My name is Willow. I'm the staff liaison for this meeting. And before the chairs convene the meeting, I've got a few reminders and introductory words per usual. So I'd like to begin by acknowledging that tonight's meeting is being held on Kalapuya Ali'i, the traditional indigenous homelands of the Kalapuya people, whom continue to make contributions in their communities here and across the land we now refer to as Oregon. The purpose of the Active Transportation Committee is to, one, advise the City of Eugene staff and community organizations and partners on the implementation of Eugene's bicycle pedestrian strategic plan. 2, to represent community and constituent interests in transportation planning decisions. And 3, to provide feedback to staff on projects related to walking and biking. Eugene City staff will consider recommendations from the ATC along with input from other members of the public during decision-making processes. Please keep in mind that this meeting is being both recorded and live streamed to YouTube, meaning that it can be viewed on the City of Eugene Transportation Planning YouTube channel, both right now and in the future. The live transcription feature for closed captioning has been enabled. Today's meeting will begin with a 15-minute public comment period. The public comment period is an opportunity for individuals to speak to the Active Transportation Committee on transportation-related issues. Each person has 3 minutes to speak. And just a reminder, if you are going to be giving public comment, to speak loudly, because this little microphone here in the middle of the table is what picks up for the public comment. So let's go ahead and begin public comment with those of us online. If you would like to speak, you can use your raise hand feature now, and I will unmute your microphone. Just a reminder that when it is your time to speak, please give your name, city of residence, and if you live in Eugene, your ward or neighborhood. Okay, looks like we've got a couple folks here. I'm going to start with Rob, and then I'll go to Claire. All right, Rob, I should have given you opportunity to speak if you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Willow. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, everyone. Hi, Active Transportation Committee. I am Rob Zako. I live in Eugene in Ward 2, City Councilor Matt Keating's ward. I'm the Executive Director of Better Eugene Springfield Transportation, a 501c3 educational advocacy nonprofit here in town. You, of course, are the Active Transportation Committee, which is a department advisory committee. As Willow explained a couple minutes ago, you provide advice to staff on implementing the active transportation strategies and plans of the City of Eugene, and that's an important role. There are things, though, that you can't do that we as a nonprofit can do. For example, 8 years ago, we gathered petitions to the Eugene City Council and urged them to adopt Vision Zero, which the Eugene City Council did. Last fall, we led efforts to put arguments in the voters pamphlet to support the street bond measure, including 25% of that money for active transportation. And when we're asked to provide letters of support for projects such as the River Road Santa Clara Bike Ped Bridge to members of Congress, we do that as well. So our work and your work is complementary. And we're seeing a need for more work on our end of advocating and supporting elected officials. And we've started a new group that we're calling the Cycle of Change. We had our first gathering last week in the Nest, which is a building that we own at First and Washington, the Nexus for Eugene Sustainable Transportation. And we had about 30 people turn out who want to promote walking, biking, riding the bus, active transportation. So I just want to alert you that this is going on and invite members of ATC or interested members of the public to reach out to us and learn more. And I will put in the chat box contact information for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks, Rob. Okay, we'll go ahead and go to Claire. I think you should be able to unmute yourself.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Claire Riley. I'm an avid biker here in Eugene. I'm in the South Eugene area. I'm not sure what district. I watched the presentation in January about the underpass along Alder Street, and I live on Alder Street, and really wanted to encourage that. I like biking along the river, and sometimes I commute that way. But for my part of town near campus, I have to go over the railroad tracks, and that can make me feel pretty nervous. And so I would just really encourage us to be able to easily get there instead of needing to go around or over the tracks. We really need a way to get to the river without having to cross over those tracks. It's a huge deterrent for me, even though I'm a big biker. I understand the city wants to encourage people to ride bikes, but it shouldn't be so stressful to be able to go over the way. I'd like for it to feel safe and comfortable, and would just really like to see that project to keep moving forward. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you, Claire. I just want to note, Claire, that we are about to be launching our Move Huge community campaign, and it's basically an opportunity for residents to suggest projects and programs that they think would be useful. So just keep your eye out on like our social media, our In Motion newsletter, and there'll be sort of a launch of that where you can go into a interactive map and sort of like put a pinpoint and be like, project here, I really want to see this, and that'll help sort of inform our process. But this is also a great place, so thank you for being here. Okay, let's go ahead and move to hearing from the folks we have here in person. I've got Connie and John. Connie, are you interested in?
That's what I am.
Oh yeah, you've got the do not wish to speak. Okay, awesome. And then it looks like we've got a third person here as well. Are you hoping to speak today? Okay, sounds great. Thanks for being here. What's your name?
Noah.
Noah, awesome. Cool. Well, it looks like we want to hear from John, so I'll go ahead and give you the floor.
Where do you want me?
Willie, do you think you could scoot over just a little bit? And then John, if you want to stand there and just try to speak to the owl,
Okay.
which is in the middle of the table.
Well, good evening, everybody. Some of you I know, some of you I don't. My name is John Belcher. I'm co-chair of the River Road Community Organization, and I'm speaking to you in that behalf. The Eugene Planning Commission right now is looking at making amendments to the Greenway ordinance, and I think you got my memo on that. But basically what's going on is they're considering many changes, but what they have not yet put in their code is an agreement that, or a statement that all pathways that go into the Greenway should be public pathways. And I'm coming before you tonight to ask you to support that idea, as the River Road Community Organization is asking the Planning Commission to do as well. I've got some language here. I don't know that you need to be that specific, but I'm just hoping that you'll support the concept that all paths that are paved through the public land should be publicly accessible. And that's basically what this is about. The city has already allowed one pathway to be constructed that goes into a gated community. I'm not proposing that we make them take that down, but nonetheless, there shouldn't be any. So I'm open to your questions, and I hope you'll consider my motion. And if you didn't get a copy of this, I'll send another set around. I apologize for wasting the paper.
That was an email today from Misty.
So does anybody have any questions? Yes.
What would you like from us right now? Would you like us to vote or?
If it's conceivable in your process to just pass a motion saying you support River Road's desire to have all public pathways, all pathways within public property be public.
Sue and I talked about this in terms of process, because it's not on the agenda, so usually we wouldn't do something like this, but it is something that is, needs to be submitted by next Tuesday. So, I think what we agreed is that we would try to find time on the agenda for it. And if we can't find time, the agenda is full, but if we can't find time on tonight's agenda, then we have an idea about writing a letter that we can sign on to after. So right now we have, let me see, a couple more minutes. So this would be a good time for clarifying questions, so that if we do have time on the agenda, do people feel like they might be able to show support for that tonight, or? Go ahead.
I'd just like to ask, I read the missive here and Missy sent out. And I understand what the code is asking, but what I don't hear here, and I guess I'm assuming my own understanding or justification of this, but I don't see a why. So can you summarize why the River Oaks Neighborhood Association believes strongly that all paths going through the public shared use path should be public as opposed to private?
I think you've said it already. I mean, basically, why would we allow private access through public land? Constructed on public property? It
So the
seems-
pathways are maybe okay, but they need to be open to everyone.
Right, what at least one developer is proposing to do is to construct a path through the park. Through the bike path, it's gated on their side, so only their tenants can go through. And that's what's been done before, basically with that other path. And I don't think that's proper, nor does our board of membership.
Andrew,
Can I ask, I guess, is the current situation that was a park staff or someone, I guess I'm just, in my mind, right, like, I guess I'm at like, if a development wouldn't be connected, right, and let's just say in some scenario where people have to go, a mile around to get to an access, part of me is like, well, if they're not gonna open it up to people, right, do we want those people to have access, or do we want them to go a mile around? And I think the answer is like, well, I want that. I generally agree that things should be publicly accessible, but like parks, currently like park staff have the ability to say yes or no, right? Or so someone at the city, like if you're a developer, you can't go build in the park. You're
Have to get permission, sure.
right, and so I guess like maybe the context is important to me, is what I'm articulating, right? Like through a children's soccer field, big no. But like on an unused piece of land, if it connects a lot of people to path, maybe, I guess, are you seeing it in like? Are you
To me, it's
seeing-
an equity issue.
Sure,
Certainly they can construct the path through, but they should allow it for everyone to use it.
let's have one more question and then we can see.
So in your example, the development would have been able to say construct the path, but there just wouldn't have been a lock gate.
Right, and we, when we spoke to that developer, we said, great, we'd love for you to do that, but allow us all to use it, please.
Okay, so the development could still be connected to the path. But just
Yes,
right, other people. can
and
use it as
we
well.
would appreciate that.
Is there a deadline that you need to, or that?
The
city
planning
has?
commission is likely to make their decision on Tuesday.
So we don't want people to feel rushed because this came up and it's, sort of out of order, but we also want to support if we can, and if we feel like we want to support. So we don't want anybody to feel like, I gotta vote now, I don't understand it or anything like that. So we're gonna let this play out a little bit by putting it, I think, you're going to have a motion to amend the agenda.
Yeah, can I I move to amend the agenda to include an opportunity to vote on this.
Opportunity to discuss it more and then possibly vote.
Yeah, okay.
Okay,
Second.
no, second, okay. So we do have an agenda item called planning projects timeline. And it was basically about capital project planning, and I was just gonna kind of tell you all like what the timeline is. That's not pressing at all, and we could easily talk about that next month. So if it's a 10-minute agenda item, we could sort of transition that to next month and talk about this for 10 minutes today. If that seemed okay with people.
If we can fit it in elsewhere, I'd rather do that and hear about the timeline because we're thinking about it for our subcommittees and everything. But that could be a backup.
Okay,
So is everybody okay with trying to fit it in somewhere? And it's not, if it doesn't come to a vote because people aren't comfortable with that, that's fine. Like, we don't want anybody to feel like I have to be on board or anything like that.
we have the leading pedestrian intervals that we could also push to next month, if that was preferable.
Yeah, let's just see let's see where it fits. If it fits before that, great.
Okay.
And if it doesn't, then we can, I think the timeline, would be a good one.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
Thank you for
thanks,
that,
John.
and
We'll
I
see what we can do.
apologize for.
We have to-
No, we understand. Sometimes that happens. Yeah.
Thank you.
That happens.
Not a problem.
I
Okay.
think we have to vote on it, whether to amend. the
Oh,
agenda.
sorry. Yes. All in favor? Oh, we have a second, I think. All in favor of amending the agenda to fit in time for more discussion and possible vote? And opposed? Okay. We'll amend the agenda,
Okay.
massage it a little bit. Okay, is there a motion to approve the January meeting notes?
So moved.
You a second?
Second.
All in favor? And back is to the Zoom people.
All right, this is Shane. Who motioned and seconded on that? I'm taking some notes.
Sue motioned and Clarissa seconded.
Okay, so that is approved. The ATC retreat debrief. We have 15 minutes for this, and we just wanted to follow up with the retreat that we had in February, I guess it was, and find out if you have comments about that and feedback. So let's see, I think I want to give everybody a couple of minutes to discuss it with somebody, but we're thinking about, was it worthwhile? How did it go for you? Is this something we want to make an annual event? Just give us some general feedback, if you have any suggestions to make it better. We do intend to build on the retreat input, over the year, just so you know that. So if you could just turn to somebody and say, how did it go for you? Just for a couple, like a minute or so, and exchange some ideas about the retreat, see if you can remember it. It's been a minute. So go ahead and do that for just a
How did the
minute,
retreat
like
go?
that.
I thought it went well. It was fun, and no people-
Were you there?
Anybody have anything they want to share out, as far as how it went for you? What did you hear from your partner? And especially any ideas for improvement, and I'd like to hear about if you think it should be an annual event. Yes, Clarissa.
I thought it was great to meet the new members that way and to have kind of a more, not totally social aspect to it, but to be able to put names and faces and learn about each other. That was really nice, especially coming from, I jumped on the ATC when it was very much Zoom oriented, and that was very intimidating.
Yeah.
So to be able to like reground in the context of where we are was really cool.
Anybody else?
Oh, so yes for annual.
Yes, for annual.
That's the other important part of that.
We need to have a show of hands if you think it should be an annual thing, or it could be an annual thing. Okay. Any other comments?
I really appreciated the team building contests and games. That really kind of brought out some characters and yeah, I really enjoyed that.
Okay. And my partner Lucy had an idea for a possible improving it. She thought the brainstorming part where we all got to say what we other projects that we might want to work on. Lucy said it might have been a good idea to send out a brainstorming thing ahead of time, so that we could get the juices going and get some ideas generated. I thought that was a really good thing that I had in mind. Any other suggestions that came up? Yeah, Charlotte.
We talked about that, we liked engaging with the material, we liked having something sent out beforehand, and it would have been helpful to have city staff or somebody walk us through those projects and, you know, spend 10 minutes just to, so we could get ahead of it.
Mhm. And we actually opted not to do that because of time.
Yeah.
But that maybe it was a necessary step that can't be missed. Anybody else feel like that? Like we needed time for that? Okay.
Yeah, it's a both and for me. I think having the written materials first ahead of time, the kind of overview of the different projects and nomenclature was helpful, but for you folks especially, it might have been nice to have a
Okay.
little bit of a brief overview of each project from the
All right.
subject matter experts.
Thank you. And then Sue's going to follow up with leadership team. The leadership team met. It was, go ahead, Sue. Let you
Well,
tell who was
so
on it.
as you remember, we were kind of trying to figure out what to do about subcommittees or work groups or whatever after that. And you all appointed a leadership team, which was Misty and Charlotte and Mary and I to come up with a plan. So we did. And so here's your plan. So what we decided was that we'll invite everyone to meet on this time slot 2 weeks from now. So 2 weeks after the ATC meeting. At 5:30 for probably a little over an hour. At a location that I think is still being worked out. And so at these, we're calling them work group meetings. We'll divide into 2 people or 2 groups. And each group will have, will take on one of the project areas of the city's, the 7 project areas. And the idea is to, okay, look at that project area, look at our comments or questions or what issues, concerns we had about them. And then also look at our brainstorming ideas and see if there's any of them that fit together. Because you'll remember we had the city's projects and we had our brainstorming projects, and it's sort of like we need to kind of try to do both. So for instance, one thing that came to my mind is like there's one of the project areas is something about red light, having red lights and speed enforcement. It's like it looked like from the comments that and we thought there might be a role for that, but we weren't entirely sold on all of it. And meanwhile, so maybe we'd say, okay, this is all about safety. We definitely want to improve safety, but we think in addition to maybe some red light enforcement, maybe we think it just should spend money on some traffic calming or some of that money, so we might want to blend together the brainstorm ideas and the project ideas and hopefully come up with some recommendations. And once we come up, so at any rate, each of these 2 groups will have a facilitator and somebody taking notes. And once we have some recommendations, and this might take more than one work session because some of these project areas are huge. So once we have some recommendations, they'll ask for a volunteer to write them up and bring those recommendations to the ATC to potentially vote on a letter or recommendation to the staff. And I'm sure it'll be kind of a work in progress. Might have to sort of finesse the details of it. But that's the plan. And so the first work group meeting would be 2 weeks from tonight, which is some date, I don't remember. And the rest of you guys, am I missing anything? What have I left out or gotten wrong?
Well, just remember that at the retreat, we agreed as a group to meet together, and we agreed to do it for 3 months as a trial. And so we're always going to meet 2 weeks after the ATC meeting. So if you don't have it on your calendar yet, like I did not, it'd be good to put that on your calendar 2 weeks after each ATC meeting in March, April, and May, and then we'll assess and see where to go from there. Is there anything else, Misty or Charlotte?
Yeah, so we had like how many projects? We had like
7
projects, so we take two, and we can decide whichever 2 are the most pressing. Perhaps there's like a deadline coming up that the city needs us to come up with you know, some language or whatever. So we work on those two for, you know, that session. And then the next session, we can hopefully have come up with our plan for those. And if we have, we can move on to the next two on our agenda and we can tackle those. And that way we're like doing our job here. And also, you know, we're also talking about that other things that we're passionate about too, that are going to be intertwined in those projects in some way, depending on what subject they fall under.
We hope. That's
We
the-
hope.
yeah. And I can also see, we've got these 7 projects. I'm seeing them on chart paper, like around the room. We tackle 2 at a time. And there might be some overlap, you know, like we might hold one over. But then there might be something that we say, no, we also want to just work on this, and that becomes a standalone project. If we can't find a bridge for it, but it's really important. So we don't want to just, you know, we want to make sure we incorporate all of the things that we're passionate about, as many things as we're passionate about as we can as well. Any questions about that, or we'll see y'all in 2 weeks. We'll let you know the place.
Yeah, so I think we were tentatively starting, I think we were starting with the 2 project areas being the 2 that rated highest of our, you know,
Yes.
prioritization, which were the capital projects planning, which is the projects, not the ones that are being built this year, but the ones that are planned over the next couple of years, and the Move Huge. You know, that's the whole public input, talk about the bond measure as well, yeah, that kind of thing. So, and those are 2 huge things. So it might very well take more than 1 month to come up with, put our thoughts together and come up with any recommendations. So we have.
We won't have anything fancy like this set up, but we'll be able to, if you have to Zoom, like I will have to actually, we'll be out of town, but we'll have a little laptop set up and you can be there virtually, but we hope people can make it in person.
And will you guys bring sort of the synthesis of our notes from a month ago? Because
Yeah.
I'm kind of forgetting.
We can send those out too. They're on the Google Drive, but not everybody knows how to get there, I think. So maybe we can send those out ahead of time.
Great.
Yeah.
And you all should have the Willow's summary of the 7 project areas, although we could send that out again if you've lost it or whatever.
Okay. Let's go on to we gained a little bit of time there. That's good. Let's go on to the Move Huge one.
Okay. One moment while I share my screen with the folks who are on Zoom. This hybrid world is sometimes crazy. Okay. Okay, so I wanted to start off, we've got 20 minutes to talk about the Move Huge launch timeline and outreach. I want to respond to a lot of the questions that ended up on the poster during the retreat for Move Huge. And then we can have a bit of a discussion. So we've got 20 minutes for that. Then we'll take our break. And then we're going to go into the survey, the Move Huge survey that Shane is also here for. He's up there on Zoom to chat with us about. So let's go ahead and get started just with a quick overview reminder of what Move Huge is, just so it lands clearly for everybody. So Move Huge is the transportation planning team's campaign to talk to the community about what projects, like things to build, infrastructure, and programs, things to do that are going to help make walking, biking, rolling, taking the bus more, enjoyable, easier, more accessible, and then also what's going to make traveling for everybody safer. So that's kind of the idea behind Move Huge, is we're talking to the community, trying to get responses about that. It looks like 2 main things, basically. Interactive map where people can put pins and say, like, I want a project here, specifically this kind of project. Or they can put a pin and just say this general area. I don't know what to do here, but it's a problem. Or there's the survey, and the survey is going to be more on that program side. What can the city do to encourage walking and biking? What kind of policies could we do? What kind of programs could we run? Is breakfast at the bike bridges like super, super awesome? Does that make you bike to work that day? Like, what is it that gets you excited about walking and biking? So that's kind of what the survey is for, and to understand challenges. And then the map is like, what should we build? we're gonna get a ton of ideas, right? And one of the reasons we're asking people, what should we build, is because we have $15 million for walking, biking, safety, and street trees from the 2025 to 2029 street bond. So we've got $15 million to spend. That's really not that much in the grand scheme of things. We're probably going to get hundreds of millions of dollars of ideas. So this is just the first step in sort of crowdsourcing ideas. And then from there, we'll do a prioritization project to kind of figure out like, okay, how do we decide? We're also going to be we're planning to update the walk and bike piece of our transportation system plan. The transportation system plan is what the city adopts. It's like an adopted plan about projects that we hope to do. And we're planning to update that list because we've actually built a lot of the things on the list. So we kind of need to update it and get new projects on there. That's the Move Huge overview. Are there any questions about that? There are like a lot of questions from the retreat that I am going to get into, but. Okay, so let's hop into timeline and outreach events. I'm actually going to drag over for this part the Move Huge Engage Eugene page, which is live, but it doesn't have the tools on it yet. It's just a landing page right now. So this is our Move Huge Engage Eugene page. It's got just like a quick overview about what Move Huge is. And then there's this little, our engagement tools are currently in development. So we've got the survey, which you're going to help us with today, and the map, which we're building, and those are going to go live hopefully in the next week. So by the end of next week, hopefully that's like our goal, to have stuff sort of launching, and then we can start telling everybody we know to go on here and use those tools. Over on the right is this engagement opportunities widget, I guess you could call it. And this is where we have a bunch of public events. We're doing some online open houses over Zoom. We're doing a variety of different tablings across the parks. And these are just the like open to everyone events. We have a handful of other types of events that we're doing that are not just like anybody can come. They're a little bit more targeted. And I'm going to talk about that today when I answer one of the questions from the retreat, which is, are you only tabling? Is that all you're doing? Because all of these are tabling, and then we have a big in-person open house. The in-person open house is on April 20th from 4:30 to 7. That is solidified, and we are doing it at the Farmers Market Pavilion downtown. I think it's going to be super, super fun to have that whole space. We'll have maps to talk to people. We'll have dot activities. We'll have all sorts of stuff to kind of engage with people beyond this online tool. So the online tool is great, but it's only, it only gets us so far. We also want to talk to people in person. So that's what the tabling and the open houses are for. Down here is the project timeline. So January through March, we've been building our engagement plan and all of our print material maps and surveys. We're going to do March through the end of May is our big public engagement push. So like I said, by the end of next week, if we can get our tools live, we're going to be just pushing our public engagement, talking to as many people in Eugene as we can. Hopefully that's a part that the ATC can help us with, is talking to people, getting ideas from them, sharing the link to get to this webpage where they can share their own ideas. And then end of May and into June, we're going to kind of be compiling all the millions of ideas that we got and then ranking them June through July, and then kind of working with you all and other stakeholders about sharing project ideas and things like that. So then we refine the project list, and then we take it in October. We take the things we're going to build list to City Council for approval for the bond money. And then the things we're going to do list, the programs, will come to ATC, and we'll be like, is this the right direction that we're going in? We'll also probably bring the things we're going to build list to you all, but a little bit earlier, I would think. So that's the timeline of Move Huge. We're kind of right there. We're like right in launch mode. We're really, really close. We've been working super hard on getting everything ready. As far as print materials go, we're going to have bookmarks that have a QR code and a link to the website, and like that question, how can we make walking and biking better? We're going to print a bunch of those, so I can give some to each of you, so that as you're out in the community talking to people, you can kind of hand it out and be like, well, if you have project ideas or program ideas, like go to this website and you can put them on the map, or you can take the survey. So that'll be one piece that we could give you. We're also going to have yard signs sort of distributed along the paths and in the streets and stuff, so that people who maybe aren't online or get their news in a different way or something, they can see a yard sign and be like, oh, what's this? And scan the QR code or go to the website. Okay. let's go back to the PowerPoint because I have the next thing to talk about. Retreat answers. You all had a lot of questions at the retreat about Move Huge, so I printed them out and I did my best to respond to them. I think I've just answered some of them during this overview, but I'll kind of go through these. The first question was, is this just about bond funding? The answer is no. It was originally conceived because of the bond. Like we were like, oh, the bond passed, we need to talk to people, what should we build? And then we're like, but at the same time, we kind of also need to do this TSP, Transportation System Plan update. And our active transportation strategy expired, like we finished it. So we also need to know what kind of programs we should do. And so we're like, we could have a lot of things to talk to the community about. So we lumped them all together and called it Move Huge. And so it is about the bond, but it's also about programs and it's also about just project ideas to inform our future work beyond the bond measure. The next question you had was, what is the timeline? I feel like I just went over that, so we're feeling good there. Any questions about the timeline? Okay. And the next question was, could alley improvements be included? Yes, totally. If any of you or anybody you know wants to point out that alleys are an important piece of the transportation system and you want to see improvements on those, you can put them on the map and put some ideas, and that, it's going to go into what we're considering. So it could totally be included in the ideas that you share. Is tabling effective? That was a question that we got for Move Huge. If tabling were the only thing we were doing, no, it wouldn't be an effective strategy. It is, however, an effective strategy if it's one tool in kind of an overall engagement plan. And that's what we're doing, is we have a good bit of tabling as one of our tools. And it is one of our primary tools for talking to just like whoever, right? Like we're just going to be out there. We're going to talk to whoever happens to come by. It's not really targeted at all other than geography. Like we're going to do one here and one there. We're kind of putting them around town, but we are just talking to the general public through our tabling. In addition to the tabling, we're hosting the citywide in-person open house. We're hosting 3 online open houses. Something you may be interested is that we're hosting listening sessions with social service organizations in town. So we're going to be talking to both staff from those social service organizations, and if they can provide us access to the folks that they serve, we can be talking to those folks as well. Some of that is going to be on our own, like staff is going to be doing that with the social service organizations. Some of it is in conjunction with land use planning, who's located here in the atrium. They're doing a parking study through the Climate Friendly and Equitable Communities. I don't think you need to worry too much about what that is, but basically the state was like, you need to change parking minimums. And so now land use planning is trying to figure out how to change parking minimums. So we're kind of combining. So when we go to do some of those listening sessions with target populations, we'll talk about Move Huge and parking at the same time. The purpose of doing that is that we've heard from some social services that they kind of have community fatigue, where like the city's like, talk to us about this and this and this and this, because you represent this type of, this community. And they're like, this is so much. So when we can partner with our other teams, we can sort of go to them once instead of twice. So that's the sort of purpose behind that. We're going to be going to neighborhood association meetings, hopefully only for 10 minutes or so, to kind of give them the spiel and show them how to use the website and do their thing. And we'll probably, I think we're planning to host an open house in Bethel, the Bethel neighborhood as well. So we'll have the downtown neighborhood, or anyone can come to the downtown one, and then we'll host one in Bethel where anyone can come to the Bethel one, and that can get to that neighborhood. Okay. Do you want to keep hearing about all the other things we're planning to do? I could go on, but I guess my main point is that we are doing a lot of tabling, but we're doing a bunch of other stuff too. And even though it's not going to be super visible to you all or to the general public, the staff is trying to really approach this with when we're thinking about target populations, we have to do it differently than just setting up a table and hope they happen to walk by. And we know that, and so we're doing those extra efforts.
Willow, I'll just highlight that, the tabling isn't like some tabling where you're just sitting at an event and you're behind the table. When we talk about tabling, we're actually out in the community at a certain location, like Willow said, targeting an area. So we'll be along the Amazon path, West Bank path, at a community center and we're out with our map and sort of pieces of the survey, but not the survey, talking to people directly who are there using the network and the system. And so it is an important part of sort of connecting with the community where they're at, where they're dealing with the transportation issues, and maybe even using them at that point in time. And so we're really trying to spread this interaction out, and so, obviously that question sort of was weighted towards like, is tabling even effective? And it's like, no, if it's just that, and like Willow said, and it's done a certain way, we're really being intentional with how we utilize that and where and how it's combined with other things. So I just wanted to highlight that piece of it too.
Yeah, thanks, Shane. We're gonna be tabling with extra pizzazz. Like, we're not just gonna be sitting there being like, anybody want a free bike ride? We're gonna be out there like really doing stuff. Okay, looks like we've got a couple questions. We can start
So,
here.
Willow, how did you choose organizations for the listening sessions?
That's a great question. We kind
Social
of,
service versus environmental? Where,
yeah, so we have target populations. That was one of the questions actually from Move Huge, is what are your target populations? We're really sort of orienting the social service organizations to the target populations, if that makes sense.
Okay.
So some of our target populations are youth. So we're doing some stuff at the public library with youth events. We're going to a couple high school sporting events because we really want to talk to youth, because youth often don't drive, right? They're using the transportation system. Latino community members. So we're going to be doing some working with social service organizations there. People who use transit. So we've got some transit based tabling that we're doing. Low income community members. So we're doing, affordable housing. We have a couple different sessions at affordable housing places. LGBTQ plus community members and BIPOC community members. So those are social service organizations we're going to be approaching that way too. So that's how we made that decision. It was based on the target audience. And I know that there's like so many target audiences we could talk to, and we had to narrow because we only have so many staff. So that's why we sort of chose those target audiences. Yeah.
And my question's really kind of to that point. I think as I was reading through the survey questions and the Move Huge plan, and I saw what Shane was mentioning, that, we're going to table in places like Alton Baker Park and Amazon and the Fern Ridge Path, places where there's users of the system. I wondered if there might be benefit in targeting non-users, as in like going to the parking lot of Costco and sitting there and saying, asking, do you use the system? If so, we're great. How and what? But if not, why not? And what might make you? So just in terms of that, kind of get broad representation, that might be a group to include.
I second that.
Yeah.
Maybe not Costco because it's big quantity. Supermarkets, supermarket, Safeway.
Yeah, one of the
Market of too many choices.
we really wanted to table at Winco, but they gave us a hard no, that they don't allow folks tabling there. So I think that we were like, oh, that was an idea we had, maybe we can't do it, but I think we could sort of pursue.
We just have an
where
informal raise of
else.
hands. Do you think that's a good idea to go and seek people out?
People lined up and circling around Starbucks.
Okay, yeah,
That's good audience. They ain't going anywhere.
that's worth noting. I think it's, Shane's taking notes, so he's got it down. Down that the ATC thinks we should sort of push beyond like users of the active transportation system.
You don't want to shift the people who are already doing the right thing 5% better. You want to get the people who aren't like you 5% better, because there's more of them.
Yeah, and
So
I
it
think,
has a bigger impact.
yeah, and I think one of the reasons, not to like try and justify what we're doing, because I think this is good feedback. It was originally conceived as a bond measure thing, and we were like, we want to know what walking, biking, and transit projects we should build. And if we talk to people who are driving everywhere, like we're not going to get the information we need. So I think that's where some of this tabling locations originally came from. But now that we've broadened it, and like you said, we're trying to figure out what can we do to encourage walking and biking. We're going to need to talk to people who aren't walking and biking. So
Is there any involvement from the ATC in these tabling efforts?
we would love to, we would love to have you all. And I think when I brought up the Move Huge page with all of these events. I'm working on a one pager right now that has them all listed and exactly where they are and what time. And I'm planning to send that to you all and be like, does anybody want to come join us for these? And get you involved in the online open house and stuff too, but I'm not quite there yet.
I was just gonna say, based on my experience, the trick is getting people to stop. I mean, they see you, they're there and they're riding on past, or they start to think, but then, oh my God, they're gonna, you know,
Yeah.
getting accosted by these people with all their questions and they just don't want any part of it. So having some, I think the parks thing used free ice cream, that helped. Or if you can get the kids there, then their parents kind of have to come, you know, so you have to kind of be very deliberate about how you're gonna get people to stop.
Yes. If anybody else has anything they really want to share, otherwise this might be a time when we've got 10 minutes, we could fit in the discussion about that John brought to us. Does anybody have something, not to rush this either?
I have a
lot more.
Oh, I was gonna say, I do have more
Oh, sorry.
questions
Go
from the
ahead.
retreat that I did want to answer.
Go ahead, sorry.
But Connie, did you have something?
Oh, I just wanted to put in another reminder about using the weekly to notify people and get your, in the big event, you know, in the schedule on the weekly for events.
Okay.
And hopefully you'll have paper surveys as well. Not on computers.
Yeah, we've been discussing that. Yeah. Okay, let me just roll through some of these other
Okay.
questions.
Sorry.
The next question was, what is the status of the map program? We are working on a wiki map right now where people can place pins and then have a comment box and kind of write about what they want to see. They will have to submit an email in order to use that. That's what the team has landed on. How much funding for West Eugene was one of the questions that was on the Move Huge poster. And I basically don't have an answer to that question. It's the bond isn't parsed out by geography. It's pretty flexible with where we decide, you know, where the money ends up being spent. But I think we are aware, the city's often aware of like geographical equity. But 15 million, like I said, isn't that much. So it kind of depends on where the projects end up being. But you know, the geographical equity will definitely be considered. And I think parts of town that need more interventions is also going to be a piece of what we're thinking about. But yeah, we don't know how much money is going to go where. Okay. The rest of these are just comments that I don't think I need to answer. I will encourage you all to use the map once it's live and take the survey. I think you all are users of the system. And so once that map is live, there's ones that say like, better lighting to improve safety was just a comment on the Move Huge poster, like put that in the map or say that in the survey. That'll be really helpful information for us. Yeah,
It's just really quick. Is it safe to say, if you get a ton of surveys saying we want this or that in West Eugene, then you guys will allot and say, okay, yeah, there's a lot of surveys hinting to West Eugene, so we're gonna do something over in West Eugene.
So that's a really good question. We are definitely going to have like popularity of a project as one of the criteria in the prioritization matrix, but it's definitely not going to be like the deciding factor. We have a lot of city goals and city responsibilities and a lot of other things. Is it linked to an existing system? Like all these other things we're going to consider, but popularity and like what we hear during this process is going to be one of those. Okay, one of those components, definitely. Yeah, Julie.
Did I hear you say that people have to put in an email address to be able to? Is there a way to get around that? Because I cannot tell you how many people do not want to do that and they will not do it because they have to put their email in. I mean, it is an actual discourager.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because we have had this conversation round and round and round in circles on our team. Like, do we have people register? Do we not have people register? We ended up escalating it to like the sort of like higher communications and higher website people at the city. And they are sort of like they really want us to require emails. It's kind of like something coming from higher because we were having trouble making decisions because there's a lot of pros and cons to having the email provided or not. And so I think at this point we've like decided that we're going to be requiring emails.
Yeah, and I'll just highlight that it's actually not just email. It is for Engage Eugene. It is actually a registration piece. And it is, you only need to have your email, but there are some questions that are asked that help us in sort of looking at our equity and who we're actually reaching. And that's a really key important part of making sure, are we only hearing from this segment of the population, or are we actually getting representation in this survey? And so that's one of the reasons that it's really important to the city of Eugene that we do utilize the tool that we have with Engage Eugene to actually do that piece. We recognize that some people, and in working with our partners that are using the platform of Engage Eugene, we actually don't think it's as high of a turnoff as some people think. They have really great data on activation and utilization and registration. And we feel pretty confident that because it is one of our tools and that we're also doing these tabling, we're also doing these targeted listening sessions, and we're doing these other pieces, that we can get good information and even better information when we have that information about who is taking the survey.
I think the gut instinct is like, oh, why are we making people register? But we've talked with the comms folks and they've given us data that they have from our website that's like over 80% of the people who land on this page register and follow through, which is quite high. So we're feeling like pretty confident, and then in conjunction with all the other things we're doing, I think we're still gonna get like a good turnout. So that's kind of what we landed. Yeah.
I don't know how formal we are in terms of recommendations, but I'd really like to see our group involved with feedback on the prioritizing matrix and criteria.
I had a feeling you were gonna say that. I don't think we have any problem with that. Yeah, I have actually have an email drafted that says the ATC wants to be involved in prioritization, because I knew y'all were gonna say that. So that'll be kind of in the Reed Dunbar and Logan Tellis, Catherine Rohan. Those are some of our transportation planners. It's going to be kind of in their realm of doing that prioritization matrix. And I'm going to be really clear communicating with them that the ATC wants to, have a role and be involved in that development.
Both criteria and rankings.
So I'll share with them about that, and then we'll prioritize, we'll sort of like, what's the word I'm looking for, strategize internally about where we feel like it makes sense for the ATC to have an input there.
Right, and Shane, if you could let the records show that there are some people who have concerns about the email thing, even though we heard you're going to do it anyway. I do see a lot of people around the table going like, would you raise your hand if you do have a concern about that? I don't know, some people.
Noted.
Okay, thank you. Okay, it is time for our break, so soon I'll put our heads together and see if we want to prioritize things on the agenda for the second half,
Okay.
as far as
Okay.
fitting something else in.
I think we've got a 5-minute break, so come back at 6:30.
Okay.
Gosh.
16. I gotta get myself there and get out the door.
Probably not gonna be this.
End up wrapping up. I pull up and, do we know, like?
But
I
it's
just
just engineer.
I get, oh, yeah, for sure. I'm a visual person. Let's see.
He said she could do the primary either. Suggested.
Oh, thank you.
She could send this out.
So maybe this is actually harder for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull up Eugene.
It does. Right there.
What's an address?
Well, it's just south of Countryside Pizza.
We just do it. It's a big truck.
Either one is fine, but this one, if we wait another month.
I don't want to say that. This is new, this is the bride. Yeah.
Brad from Willow.
Well, I think there might be,
They're working.
you know, people.
Well,
that-
here it is.
Basically.
Basically.
Telephone number.
Here's pizza, so like asking people, do you like
And here we go. Well, sometimes it rains, it's snowing, but it might get warmer, but it might.
That's, it's so.
Rule Road and survey. Requested review survey, this guy, the presenter is Shane Rhodes.
All right, and actually, Willow, I think I'm gonna switch to my screen
Oh, okay.
to have the survey up. Let's see if this works. There we go. All right, so everyone on ATC should have received, along with the agenda, the Willow sent out the adjusted agenda, the survey that is in our draft format. We have been doing a lot of refinement on it and have gone through a couple different layouts and sort of structural pieces, and I wanted to bring it to ATC tonight before we launch it to get some feedback and make changes to it to make improvements. We did one event. We did our first Move Huge outreach event last night, actually, at Madison Middle School. Reed was out there talking about the West Bank Path extension, and we had a Move Huge table there with some sort of prototype map and survey engagement tools, kind of rough it out and see what it looked like and felt like. And I already have some changes that I want to do based on that. And so I'm hoping to do more changes and that you'll give me more work, I'm sure, this evening. But the basic idea, we've gone through some different iterations of, what we want to get from this survey, its focus, and how we're framing pieces. I'm very open to ideas and changes. We've tried some different formats with ranking, and I'll kind of talk about why we're going about it the way we are. But I'll run through it really quick. You've seen it, but I just want to cover it really quick and maybe tell you why we're doing it a certain way. I will highlight that the idea is that this is more programmatic than it is about infrastructure, because the map and the comments to the map is going to be focused more on the infrastructure. And so the idea with this is more on the programmatic, sort of get a feel for the general community, where they're at, what they're interested in, what's a barrier. There is space in there that there's some free form pieces, and we know we'll also hear about infrastructure in there too. So we're hoping to capture that and include that in our sort of final analysis and report and sort of what comes out of this. So kicking us off, we have, how do you most often get around town? Rank in terms of how often you use each travel option, with 1 being the most frequent. And so this is just a basic, how are the people who are taking the survey actually getting around? Biking, taking the bus, walking, driving, skate, scooter, Uber, Lyft, taxi, Zipcar, carpool, vanpool. I'm going to run through the survey really quick. If you can jot down notes and say, okay, question number 1, what about this? That'd be helpful.
Text any larger, it's pretty hard to see.
Yeah, I probably can. Does that help?
Yes. Oh, that's my thing. Yeah.
Means I'll have to scroll as I go. But the second question is about, in an ideal world, how would you most like to get around town? Rank in terms of which travel option you'd like to use most, assuming there were no challenges to using it.
Nice.
Okay. People can choose a number, like this is my number 1 choice, this is my number 2 choice. They don't have to choose them before they move on. They can say, oh, but that one's certainly my last. And, so it doesn't matter, just they can choose 1 or as many. And then we move into a little bit more specific. What makes walking trips challenging for you? And so this is where they have to choose the top 3. This was originally a ranking one, and I really wanted to get a feel for that. One of the, and so these are, some of these are going to be infrastructure, but just like, what are the things that are barriers to people generally? We don't have an other on here because I felt like that was going to get us just too broad, and like we're going to have all these piecemeal pieces. So if we're missing something key here, that's what I would like to know. The time it takes, feeling unsafe walking near car traffic, afraid of being a victim of crime, cold, rain, weather, and actually this one should be reworded. I think we have weather and then in parentheses those. poor lighting, distance of trips, need to bring children or carry things, hills, limited physical ability, sidewalk quality, lack of sidewalks, unsure the best routes to walk. So sort of logistical and infrastructure. And then the same for what makes biking trips challenging for you. Some of the similar things, but some a little bit different. And then what makes taking the bus challenging for you. Again,
You want feedback on the fly, or are you just doing an explanation right now?
I think I'm going to do a run through and then we'll come back.
Fine.
That sound okay?
Yeah.
I'll try to move through faster so that we can have time for more feedback. What's within a 20-minute walk of your home? Give people several different options with some information about how far can people go, what would support you in walking more often. And so this is one of the key pieces, right? So we have this for walking and biking, and with this idea of a 20-minute neighborhood, better sidewalks, walking paths separated from car traffic. And this is where on the chart that we put out, this was basically the question we were asking at the event that was last night. And like all the stickers were on the infrastructure things, right? Because yes, I want better paths and better sidewalks and better infrastructure. We know that. That's what we're trying to get at with the mapping piece of like where and what. What we're trying to get at with this survey is the programmatic things. And so I think I'm going to take out the infrastructure pieces here. And so I want to know more about like what are the things, and you know, some of them might not be programs we can do. They might be more support for my personal safety from police or another group. But some might be more like free wearable lights and reflective gear, better and more street lights, walking safety education classes, how-to videos, financial incentives. Those are the kind of things that we're trying to get at with the programmatic piece. And so the same thing with biking of what would support you, how-to classes. Would you attend a 2 to 8 hour class, or do you just want lots of 3 to 15-minute videos? Again, we're going to take out the infrastructure piece. But what are the programmatic pieces? A bike buddy to ride with me. What are people really interested in? And so I'd love to hear some other thoughts and ideas on this. I did put in an open street style event like Sunday Streets. Is that really what's going to get people walking and biking more? Maybe that's people see that and they're like, yes, I want that. More of that will help me. We're just trying to get a pulse from the community. I think one of the things I've realized in this, in the last couple of days of doing this, is that I want to mention bike share and e-scooters specifically, and sort of how expansion of those programs might help. And then finally, this is a little bit more about outreach. Like, where would they like to see more information about transportation on these social media specific outlets? Where would they like to be notified about opportunities for input? And that's more of like on social media, text, postcard in the mail, different resources. How do you usually get your local news? And then wrap up with, you know, what else do you want to tell us about challenges or experiences you have? Very open-ended one. Processing that will be interesting. And then whether they want to sign up for InMotion, and then submit. So those are the basics. I'm going to stop sharing for a second, get some general feedback, and then I'll share again and we'll talk about the specific questions and thoughts.
Let's go around the table. So Andrew.
I can't see everyone's hand, so.
So I guess really quickly, commentary on the safety infrastructure piece out. Like, I know that you're trying to get at programs and not just hear about infrastructure, but like, I think that's really hard because like how-to videos and stuff are like super important. But like, I think a lot of people are just gonna say like, it's dangerous, right? And they're not wrong. And so like, I don't know like how you can capture that in a way that like shows the scale of the problem that like programs are super important, but like fundamentally, we also need to devote more funding and resources towards making it actually safe, not a how-to video on how to not get hit by car, right? We need to not get hit by cars. And then on the other ones, I guess I was curious how you're gonna use the question on what's within 20 minutes of your house, because it might be kind of hard to answer. Because for a lot of people, that might be hard, the what's your house, I think it's question 6. And then question 1, I was curious why you went with ranking them, because it, I guess in my mind, it's like that's, it might be useful to know how often people do certain things. Like if I rank them, you might not understand that actually I don't use 2 or 3 of their modes. And, but there's no way for me to indicate that, right? You just be like, oh, Andrew takes Uber less often than he skateboards. But actually the truth is like, I don't do either one. And so.
Real quick on that one. So would a Likert scale maybe be better of
Well, I guess
often to never, and then you rank each mode and how often you use it?
Yeah, but
Yes.
again, like, I guess it was a question of like, if you had a specific purpose for doing it that way, but if you don't, I think it might be more useful, the Likert scale kind of version on how often you do it. But if you have a specific purpose, then please give me more of my comment, I was just curious, I guess.
I saw some nods. Can we just show if you think that's lots of agreement on that one thing?
Okay, great. And then if people can speak up a little bit too, we are.
We had more questions that were answered.
Yeah, we can,
Okay, will the survey be in Spanish? When you go to outreach, will it be in Spanish?
That is our goal. Yeah, we need to.
Yeah, yes.
Okay.
Yep, we've got plans to make that happen.
Really quickly, Shane. Question 3 and 4, could you add something in the options about the domination of parking lots as one of the things that could be a barrier? And question 7 and 9, on the 20-minute, add something about more services being nearby to really capture the 20-minute neighborhood thing. Thank you.
Those are great ones. And just really quick in answer to Andrew's question about why the 20-minute neighborhood pieces are, I can't remember exactly what the question was, but basically it's also to just help put people in the state of mind of thinking about what's in their neighborhood, and then you sort of like why they don't or do access those things. Because yeah, and there is a piece at the bottom there about like, you know, a 20-minute walk gets you this far, a 20-minute bike ride gets you this far.
Okay, Jerry.
Shane, I kind of took this survey myself before the meeting just to kind of see what my responses were, and that helped inform some feedback for question 3, I think it is, what makes biking trips challenging for you? There is this feeling unsafe biking with car traffic, but kind of speaking to Andrew's point about getting more granular about these things, what really I feel unsafe about is the condition of bike lanes, and sometimes like, you know, foreign materials, glass, that kind of thing. I mean, that makes biking challenging for me. And aside from weather and distance, that literally is that would be my third choice, is just you know, sometimes bike lanes have big giant cracks and gaps and glass and things like that. So that might be one to add there. And then again, as I was thinking from my own perspective, as far as taking the bus, again, this is just me, and I don't know how many other folks that applies to, but honestly, public health is a big reason for me coming out of the pandemic in particular. So I don't know if you want to add an option around that for people who just maybe don't feel comfortable with that.
Those are both great ones. Thank you.
Yeah, several points. First place, the survey seems to be assuming that people really want to walk or bike, and if you can only make it easier, they'll do it. I'd like to believe that's true. I don't really see any evidence that that's true. So I was just thinking maybe something along the lines of what would make you most likely to decide not to drive on a given trip, or make your friends more like, you know, because people seem to be pretty darn comfortable with their choice, and their choice is to drive. I also thought part of it is just the image of it, so it's like, I was thinking maybe when you think of somebody who rides a bike for transportation, what image comes to mind, or something like that? Because I think a lot of people say, that ain't me, you know? And then finally, I would endorse Andrew's point about infrastructure. I rode my bike home from that thing at Madison Middle School yesterday. And, oh, I see why those people don't ride bikes up there. That's a challenging ride after dark. Those are my points.
Anybody else coming around?
Yeah, I had some feedback. I think on the first couple of questions, there were only specific answers to the survey that were provided, and then later in the survey, I saw a couple boxes that said other and had options for comments. So my feedback would be to add more boxes where you click other and then add your reasoning for not biking if one of them is not already listed. If that makes sense.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, and then the other thing that just came to me as we were talking as a group was the lack of bike parking and like safely locking up your bike could be another point of why someone might not ride. Or,
Yeah, I thought that was in there, but I'll definitely make sure if it's not.
I want to add, I don't know if this is addable or, you know, but one reason I don't choose to walk or bike sometimes is because there are no other walkers or bikers and I don't feel safe. I don't think the crime's going to happen, but I just don't, it's just not comfortable. So
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that one.
I said.
Can you, I think you're talking the other way from the, there you go.
The lack of other cyclists and pedestrians keeps me from cycling and walking.
Thank you, that was much better projection.
Just a small one on the, why don't you use public transportation is cost. Is most people do own a car. So when they take a bus, I mean, the people who really use who ride the bus, who don't have another form of transportation, ride the bus. And then it's a very reasonable option. But if you're a low income person and you already own a car, it's an added cost and it's not cheap. It's not cheap. And so it becomes, because it's not on top of, and that is, I think cost should be on that item.
Anything else? Yes.
On the why not riding a bike, I don't think it's really covered by the affordability of a bike, but in my family, my wife and me and my daughter both have bikes, but if my wife is going someplace with us, if it is not an easily walkable distance, we are driving because we don't have a third bike. So family outings, if you don't have bikes for
Right.
I don't know if that's worth adding, but it is a real.
That's a real barrier. Yeah.
Did you catch that, Shane?
Yep, I got that.
Okay.
Hey, if you have other ideas, I imagine you can
Email them to Shane.
email Shane.
Yeah.
Good, Shane?
All right, that's great. Thank you.
Thanks, Shane.
Thanks, Shane.
Okay, the next thing is the planning projects timeline, and we did decide to see if we can talk a little bit more about the thing that John brought, and maybe do this later, or maybe you can even send it out.
I probably could send it out. So maybe let's talk about the River Road thing first, and then if we happen to have time for this, we could fit it in, and otherwise I could send it out.
Okay, that sounds great. So we heard what John's request was, and if there anybody who wants to say something before we decide if we want to vote on it, anybody who wants to speak for it or have more concerns or considerations.
I just have another question, and maybe it's obvious. The public path that's going into or being stopped by a gate, is the property on the other side of that public or private?
Private.
Okay.
So we have the map up here of the property.
Is it the
It's the undeveloped portion there, but I would encourage you to think the narrative, but not about this specific project.
Oh, right here where the cursor is. Yeah, but as an example.
So it's going to be a gated community, is that what we're talking?
Right. Gated at least on the riverside. And then only their tenants would have access to that.
Oh, no, that's not.
But again, it's, should we allow private paths to be built on public land?
Well,
You said something.
Well, I mean, I feel strongly about it because it is public land and it's a slippery slope. And you have this situation on the coast, a fair amount actually, is that you get hotels and motels and they say this is private and there's stairs up. And you can't cross their property. And there's areas where it's very difficult, it's very difficult to access the beach, and yet the beaches belong to everybody. And this to me is, an equivalent kind of a situation where you've got the Willamette Greenway, which belongs to us all, which is public, public land, is no. If you're gonna have a park, it belongs to everybody, otherwise don't have a park, it's end of subject. And so if they're not comfortable with people coming through their community and that's their prerogative to be uncomfortable, well, then they can go around too, fine. That just seems to be, that would be my position on it. I just feel like it's a slippery slope that in a time when we're dividing more and more between people being into enclaves between, oh, we don't want those kinds of people, it seems that exacerbates that kind of thinking. I don't like it. That's me. Andrew?
I really almost agree here, I guess. What I'm thinking is, right, they're not gonna be single family homes, we're talking about apartments, right? And so, like, it feels a little different to me, right? A motel on the beach, I'm very comfortable telling them no. But here, if a developer doesn't build this gate, right, and they're just not gonna provide access to the path. And then the question for me is what happens to people who live there, right? Like, we have not a lot of choices for housing. And so a lot of people are gonna end up there, even though they're probably not gonna be low income, if they are low income, whatever. I just mean, they're gonna be 100, 200 people that live there. They were basically saying like, well, we didn't want to give you access to the path and now you have to drive a car, right? And so like, how many barriers are we putting up? And like, I agree that it should be public, but should we just not allow that at all? I don't know. That's a pretty bold line. Like, there's no actual path from Racer. And I know we're not focusing on this site, right? But how many sites are there not good places, like especially on the road? How many places are there really long distances for those people to get to the path? And is the barrier we're putting up forcing those people to drive? Is, I guess, what's going through my head. And that's why I was asking earlier about like, who has the right to approve this? Because the context matters a lot to me, I guess. And as long as someone at the city can say, hey, that's not in public interest, right? Like, you're building a path from your single family home to the path, and like, you could make that open or you could go around. That just feels different. And that's why I think, also this is the clear and objective approval criteria, and we really shouldn't get into different ways that developers can do this. And John can probably tell you a lot more about it because he's very knowledgeable, but right, this isn't the only way a developer could do this. And so maybe that matters, that there are other pathways if they want to go through them. I don't know. It's hard.
Missing.
I just don't want to see a black road, cutting through the greenway. So there are lots of access, a lot of different ways that people can access. And they could put a gate, to separate themselves and the greenway, put a door there, people can walk across the greenway, but they're asking for a clean, section removing, in part of everything.
So is it disrupting the travel for like anyone from the public going through
I
there?
we have to look at a black clean pathway,
It might be disrupting pathways for wildlife.
yeah, or drainage, but that too.
I'm making an assumption that it would be mostly higher socioeconomic groups, and maybe that's not a good assumption. Because then it gets to be equity too, so. Not necessarily. Jerry?
I just want to say that Julie's comment sold me on it. I mean, I was asking why earlier, and that really does it for me. I think if developers want to make it publicly accessible, that's great. That's a win for everybody. But if they don't, then their tenants, have to access it the same way as the rest of the public. And I think to me that's a really good point.
Any other comments? I guess I'm still like a little lost on the concept of, so the path is going to be on public land, going to a private community, with private land, and the public isn't allowed to access that part of the path that's even though it's on public land,
The alarm gate, then it's gonna be.
blocking off the public section.
You could walk on a path, but the path would lead to a locked gate, and so it would be effectively useless unless you just wanted to walk back and forth.
Right. Okay.
And I think a lot of folks on River Road like are used to, like on this parcel, for example, like they can just walk across and access the path. And all of these folks who live over here, they just walk across and access the path. And once something gets built here, if this gets blocked off, I think that's the concern, is that community, you know, who used to have a 3-minute walk to the path now has a 7-minute walk to the path. And that is 5 minutes walking makes a really big difference, especially if you're walking along River Road, which is not very pleasant.
Yeah, so without this, as more development goes in, there's less and less public access.
And it becomes the developer gets to decide, because right now, you know, the way that, as I understand it, the way the city code stands is it's legal for them to block it. That is legal. And if that's what they elect to do, we can't be selective about it. If it's legal for them to do that, they can do it. That's how our codes work. So.
I mean, this is like our public park. Imagine if it was like a kid's park right there and they want to put a driveway through it. Like, that's our land, our city land right there, that they're going to put a driveway basically through.
And I think,
if any, there more development is just gonna come in over the years, and what, are we gonna have, you know, pathways to every development? What if every private home had their own paved walkway to the river? You would have a whole bunch of little roads to the river.
Right. Can I just say something really quick? Is that we would have to permit each one of those, right? Because it's through the park. And so the question is, do we want to provide access to people to our active transportation network? And if we don't provide access to the active transportation network, what does that mean, right? If we have a housing development that has several hundred people that could access our active transportation network, and we say, no, you can't have access to that, what does that mean for access to our active transportation network? You know, recognizing the importance of community access and our need to keep open community access. But I just want to, you know, put in that piece that, you know, if developments do happen along there, that, you know, that it's either, you know, like we also need to be conscious, just as transportation staff, of how are people able to access our active transportation network. And if we're saying make it public or you don't have access, is that actually limiting access?
It's limiting access to the 100 in your hypothetical development, but that development could be limiting access to thousands who previously used that area for public access.
Maybe there needs to be more public access. You know, if people have to go 7 minutes, maybe we need to, you know, provide more access points.
Doesn't this get us that?
No, I mean, like, just.
It's not going to provide access to all.
I mean,
I'm sorry, and just to make it clear, we can't take public comments right now. There's a public comment time at the beginning.
Can I just point out something that you don't know?
oh,
Okay, so people are walking across here, right? And we're talking about all these people over here. And they're walking, so if this is gated, they could still have an access this way or an access that way. This gate's on there, so their people would be able to gated and stay gated, but all the people from here would be able to access along a bike path that would be public on either side of the
Right.
road.
that's for that example.
Yeah.
Yes.
I mean, those people would still, right, like that's private property. You shouldn't be going across it right now either, right? Like the developer, somebody owns that, right? It's not used, but that is private property. And so I think your point about we need more public access is the real answer. And that's right, like why don't we, I mean, Shane, this is the question for you and Willow, why don't we have a nice paper path at the end of Razor Avenue to the park? And then we don't need to talk about this because, we don't need another path right there if the people live next to a path that exists. And so I think, maybe the recommendation we can all agree on is, hey, City of Eugene, why don't you provide more access to the park? So this is
Planned
the
access,
issue.
so it's not everywhere, but
Right.
every, I don't know what,
At the
you know,
terminus
half
of the
mile.
street that
But then you still have lots of private accesses, like they can do it off and. Yeah, I don't-
But we have a conversation about paving, right? Because the thing in my mind is that just like, I guess I would allow it in certain circumstances, not if it goes through a kid's playground. But if you put 150 homes right there that are apartments for people, and then they don't have access, right? And a lot of people are not gonna walk, circuitously around and walk through the muddy path that exists at the end of that road,
They
right?
just have to leave the gate on. They store the gate, they can use it, I just have to be private. They want
Yeah,
access.
I think a lot of developers are not going to, and I'm not like arguing we should give developers everything. I just think about like all the people who are going to live there that didn't make this choice, right? Like some developer, property management company made that choice. And those people that live there are now not going to access, and it's going to cause more people to drive. And I guess my feeling is just like, I don't want them to put up another barrier. And that's why I think city staff who have to permit this stuff, and I guess I trust them to make judgments about whether or not that's the right thing to do. And I don't know if this is the right thing to do, right? I'm not weighing in on this site, it's just, I trust city staff. to make the
Help me
choice.
out here, what do we do? Do we take it to a vote? And
I would say that like one counterpoint to that is if the requirement is to be public access, then like the incentive for the developer might be to, okay, we still want this community to be connected. How can I make that happen and still have it publicly available and then
Right.
public
Yeah,
lands
are they
and
not gonna
community
build
lands. But
it?
then we'd have to rely on the developer wanting to connect that area enough to make it accessible for all.
so meanwhile, we have John's request for us, so we have these other ideas and we have John's request. Are we ready to?
Well,
Go ahead, Sue.
I drafted some language just so we have something physical that we could send to the plan commission as opposed to just saying, yeah, we like this thing. So what I wrote was the Eugene Active Transportation Committee, recognizing the critical importance of the Riverbank Path System to promoting active transportation throughout Eugene, as well as the principles of the Willamette Greenway, supports the position of the River Road Community Organization that all new access ways to the Riverbank paths should be open to the public. And so that seemed like something we could either vote yes or no on and actually have some words that we approve that, or just didn't, if we approve it, then send it to planning commission.
Right, and if not everybody's ready to do that, then we can say this many people on the active transportation, but we can give a number or something like that.
I think we either approve it.
Really.
You guys want to approve it, I will abstain. I'm not gonna stand in the way of everybody else doing that, I just.
Well, what does it take to?
Well, are you worried that
A majority vote.
if we say this, that developers, they won't build any access?
I think that's 100% what'll happen. More people will just choose, you already see it, there are new apartments that have gone up on the road that do not have access to the path, which is crazy. I mean, there are hundreds of people that live 50 feet away and they have to go around, which most people aren't gonna do.
The Velo apartments, for example.
Is there like a fence or what
Yeah,
keeps
they
them?
just fence it up
they
because they
fence it
don't
up?
want people walking through and, I can't fault them for that. I don't want people in my backyard.
Well, I mean, if you put a door and you need a key to get in, people that are in active transport can walk across the lawn to the bike path. They don't need a thing.
But if there's a fence up, they wouldn't
It's
be
not
able to
about
get
me.
through anyways.
Yeah, I think
It's
that's
not about.
What are we talking about in terms of time here? I mean, I'm just thinking about my own situation, I live 2 blocks from Amazon Park. But I ride my bike 6 blocks to avoid 29th Avenue. So that I can connect in at the bike path. And I do that all the time. It's probably a difference of, it's a few minutes for sure. I just don't know that would it prevent someone who otherwise wants to bike?
Some people probably.
Or kids
Three-
who wouldn't really have access to a park area if they had to cross roads.
Yeah, I mean, in this situation, and that would be the case in all banks. You have the bank on one side. So you have a building and then you have a street level, which are there sidewalks there? And then is the connector, what I'm seeing, is that Razor Avenue? There's a connector right in there into the path?
It's secondary.
Uh,
It's a private street. That's a private street.
Okay, so I'm following you.
So one thing you're gonna get from this group is a lot of deep consideration about these things a lot.
Mhm.
So I think we just see where we land with the, is it a vote or a motion?
Yeah, and we actually, in our bylaws, there's some crazy thing about either your.
About this and.
Yeah, this,
obstructing and
yeah.
obstructing.
So I think as long as there's nobody who's an absolute no. Then it can go ahead and.
Into majority.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Or something. So,
Hey, do you want to read that again? This is, we'll call this a motion. You move.
Okay, the Eugene Active Transportation Committee, recognizing the critical importance of the Riverbank Path System to promoting active transportation throughout Eugene, as well as the principles of the Willamette Greenway, supports the position of the River Road Community Organization that all new access ways to the Riverbank Path should be open to the public.
So is that a motion?
Sure.
Okay, but you move that we approve that. Feel better. Anybody want to second that?
I second it.
Okay.
Who was the second? Sorry.
Mr. Misty.
Thank you.
All those in favor?
It's thumb up, thumb sideways, or thumb down.
What is sideways?
It's there's sideways, you would like a little bit more conversation, but you're not going to block. Thumb down is that you are blocking the motion, and you definitely need to have more conversation.
Okay, so we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 thumbs up. Oh, is Daniel still there? No. And
Daniel, you're virtual, so you need to either, oh, he gives a thumbs up on the chat.
so what
And
is
then it
that?
looks like, I think I'm seeing a couple thumb sideways.
And then, yeah, thumb sideways, 1, 2, 3. 3 thumbs sideways.
Okay, so for those 3 sideways, do you feel like you need more conversations or questions, or you're okay with it moving ahead? You just like to have a specific question answered, or just sort of voice that you're not fully behind it?
I'm just not fully.
Not fully behind it.
Not fully behind it. You don't all need to agree. It's okay.
So the way the consensus model is you want to bring everyone along. And so there's either some more discussion but no one is blocking it. So if the chairs feel like they want to move ahead with the amount of discussion that there is, that's okay. But you definitely want to check in with your thumb sideways folks.
Thumb sideways, folks. Everybody. Is it okay if we go ahead, even though we don't agree, or?
Maybe okay moving ahead. Yeah, I'd just like to note that I'm concerned that it will block those people from accessing it and.
That's my concern, too.
active transportation.
Yeah,
But I'm okay moving ahead.
yeah, and that's a really good thing to consider. So, okay, so that motion is passed. And we have noted that there's concern about people being able to access. the path.
Okay.
Okay,
I will note that if anybody does want to go to the planning commission and represent themselves as an individual, you are welcome to do that if you do want to give any public comment.
They may not take a public comment.
Oh, okay.
But I'm not sure.
Okay.
It's worth a try.
okay, we are at, we'll reschedule the number 9. So we're at number 10, 2020 downtown.
Just a quick note here, Willow, I have to head out, so hand note taking back to you, and we'll
Okay.
merge them at the end.
Okay, thanks, Jane.
Thanks all.
Thank you for modifying your meeting and for your thoughtful comments, and I appreciate it.
Thank you for coming. All right. It was an interesting conversation, something that we'll probably need to, look at again. 2023 downtown construction update.
Okay. What's that?
Will we know the outcome of this? We can ask Don first.
So to be really clear, this is about the development code, and this is one
several pathways that a developer could take to try to do the same thing. This just makes it harder under this pathway to have this type of action. And so this is kind of separate from whatever happens.
And I imagine at some point there will have, like, the planning commission will make a recommendation about what they think should happen. But I imagine they'll have a similar conversation that we just had. It's a difficult choice. Okay, let's talk about, I just wanted to give you all an update. I don't know if this will take 10 minutes, but there's a bunch of stuff being built in downtown. Things have been delayed for a while because inflation, and it just got very expensive all of a sudden, but prices have come down, and we've also been able to kind of do some negotiating to get prices down to where our funding can actually fund these projects. So I'll zoom in a little bit here. We've got Oak Street, Pearl Street, 8th Avenue, and High Street. All of them have projects happening this spring and summer, which is a little bit of a crazy situation to happen in like one of our main zones downtown, but we're approaching it with, you know, we're trying to approach it strategically, basically, especially thinking about our most vulnerable road users, which are people walking, biking, and taking transit. So with that in mind, right now, High Street is out for bid. So that's going to be the very first project that happens. The purpose of that is to make sure that we have the two-way protected bike lane built before Pearl Street goes offline. Yes. How do we get?
Did we hear anything about what the city's plans are for that in terms of traffic diversion and detouring?
I don't know yet. Reed would have more information on what's called the TPAR, temporary pedestrian access route, which incorporates walkers and bikers. For how are people who normally use High to get north?
Yeah.
What's the plan there? So I can follow up with information about that. But once that protected bike lane is built, then they'll start on paving Pearl. And that way people going south will have access via High Street. I believe then the idea is to do 8th, which is getting protected bike lanes. 8th right now is a one-way street going west, and it's going to turn into basically a two-way street for both drivers and bikers. And the bikers are going to have protected bike lanes, and the those 2 blocks where the park blocks are, that's going to be a raised intersection. So what that creates is kind of people who are driving come into pedestrian space. And I think that'll create like a really cool thing between the farmers market and the park blocks. It's a really exciting project, and it's actually like happening this year, which is super cool. And then they'll pave Oak Street. You all probably don't care too much about Oak Street because it doesn't have bike lanes on it. So I know that I'm never on Oak Street. Yeah.
So is it solid that Pearl Street is still gonna have a bike lane?
It's really close to solid. I don't think I have 100%, but I think it's more or less moving forward with the bike lane on Pearl. Yeah. I did want to note with our High Street construction that the barricade for the protected bike lane, parts of it are temporary in so much as it's kind of like a bollard system. And that's because High Street is slated for being repaved. Right now, this project, it's not repaving High Street, it's just putting in a protected bike lane and restriping. So they didn't want to do a whole concrete barrier the whole way down when they'd have to rip it out a couple years later to repave. So it will kind of start off looking a little bit temporary. And then as we do the repavement, then we'll kind of go through and put the actual protected concrete barrier. Yes.
Are they putting in the bike lights now, or are they going to do that when
the signals are going in now?
Sometimes maybe this is a question for Jake, can we talk about that? Because I think talking about how the signals work on High is a different conversation on 13th, because Oak and Pearl are a couplet. Which means that, I don't know, maybe this is really easy. The group should recommend that basically High Street becomes very bad for cars, right? It's not a through street anymore. It's a bike through street. And so, I don't know, we can talk about that another time, but if the signals are going in, I think we should, as a group, recommend that on 13th, I understand why the city's unwilling to give bikes what I would call priority, right? The signals rest on red for everyone, which works way better than the way it used to. But on High, this, in my opinion, the signals should rest on green for bikes, and cars should do that.
That's a really interesting thing.
Especially the cross traffic still has to go across High. But the idea, right, would be that signals for cars headed north on High should be bad enough that it acts as natural diversion. Because you have Oak Street as a through street. It doesn't make anyone a through street for cars, so there's no bike. go on the street with the bike lane. Bikes should get a lot more service than cars, and you should access your business, head north to the nearest turn, left or right, and make that turn and get off the bike.
I think that'd be a great thing to talk about and then write a letter and say, this is what we want.
We can put it on our next agenda or for future session.
Yeah, and the nice thing about the signals is that we can change them. So they're going in, perhaps this request isn't, doesn't happen right away because it's already out for bid, but I think it's a conversation like with 13th that we can continue to have with ATC is like, how are the signals working on high? And we can always be doing adjustments with those. And like Reed likes to say, Eugene's kind of an urban laboratory for what we build. So we're putting in this, maybe there's turn movements for people driving that we realize aren't serving High Street. And there's always things we can do, when we go to repave, we could adjust things. So we'll definitely want to be, as it goes in, hearing all of your feedback on like, how is it going? And what does it feel like?
To comment on 8th Avenue, appreciate that the bike lanes are going in, but how come the traffic is like dual directional now?
Oh, that's a great question. So there was a downtown plan that happened in 2010-ish, somewhere in there. And one of the things that came out of the public engagement process was that the one-way streets downtown are kind of absurd. Like it's one way in every direction. And it just doesn't make it very usable for everyone driving, walking, biking. So there is sort of a general consensus that when we're redoing streets downtown in a big way, we turn them to two-way. And I think that's especially true for some of the smaller access streets. It just I think it's going to really improve the flow. And I think if you bike on Broadway, which is sort of a narrow two-way street, it's pretty pleasant to bike on. Yeah. And this is going to kind of replicate that, but with protected bike lanes. So I think it's going to be, a really multimodal street. So that's kind of the reasoning behind that. But it kind of came out of community engagement. People were like, can we have some of these streets be two-way? Yeah. Okay. That's what I had for that.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
For sharing that. We are on number 11, the project updates information share.
Okay. We're actually, seems like we're doing pretty well on time.
Because we skipped 2 things.
That's okay. Because we could, if we wanted to, we could go back and talk about the planning project's timeline.
We only have 10 minutes though.
Oh, we do only have 10 minutes. Okay, let me get through some of these project updates and see where we land. The West Bank Path Extension meeting, basically that kicked off last night, was the beginning of planning for the West Bank Path Extension. We have some funding for that project, but nothing, we haven't really done any planning yet. There's been some light touch stuff. So that is, as far as where our planning projects in the timeline, West Bank Path has just started. Last night was the beginning of that. So we'll be, continuing to come to you all with information and ideas and project, design proposals and stuff to see like, where should that extension be? But while I have this map up, it is.
Where is it in general?
So the current terminus of the West Bank Path is on Hunsaker Lane. Okay, keep going. Okay, so here you go like this, and then you go underneath the belt line, and that's where that there's some gravel people here, and then it ends. Actually, it goes up this way to Beaver. And then it kind of ends right here, Echo. So basically the conversation is like, where do you go from here? Do we go up this way? And I think this is the conversation that's happening. Do we go this way? This is all gravel Knife River stuff, so it can't really go along the river, but we want it to eventually get back to the river and then go up this way. So
Sort of close to the Armitage part?
no, the Armitage is on the Mackenzie, but it is close to the Whitley boat ramp. So anyway, that's the discussion that's happening. And as we talk about it, I mean, it's definitely a very, very pertinent to the people who live right there, right? Because it's like, they have homes in that exact location. So those are the folks who are going to be the primary audience. But as we, develop plans and stuff, you all will be involved. So I just wanted to give an update there. Some of these other things I have on here, I think one thing that's not on here that I did want to update you all about is the scooter share, the e-scooter share. I do have a few updates there that I thought I would share with you all. So we're right in the final stages of finishing our contract with our new contractor, who is they're called Super Pedestrian. I think we were originally with Uber, and that contracting process fell through because we want Cascadia Mobility to be the people who run the scooter share because they run the bike share, and it makes a lot of sense. That's a really atypical process for these companies, is to like contract with a nonprofit and a city. So it's been a little complicated, but we're right in the final stages of signing that contract, and we're planning to launch scooter share on March 31st. So we're actually getting really close. And the spring term for U of O students starts April 3rd. And so that's where we're really trying to have like the launch happen so that when the students show up, now there are scooters in town and they can get all over the place. And we're going to be running some safety events, and we're going to be doing a scooter launch. And that all seems like it's definitely happening. Super Pedestrian has been super awesome. Oh my God, I totally did not mean to do that. But they've been really great to work with. And I think we're gonna have a cool pilot project. As a reminder, e-scooters are a 1-year pilot. So the city has basically been like, we're going to allow this to happen for 1 year, and it'll probably be a little messy at first, and we'll make some adjustments, and maybe it'll get better. Maybe it'll be even messier. And then we'll decide towards the end of the year, like, is this working well, or is it not meeting city goals and just causing more problems? So, yeah.
Last time you gave us an overview, or I'm not sure if it was you, but we talked about this here. There was no, I don't think there was a clear plan on where the hubs would be for the scooter share. Has that been decided yet? And does it overlap with the existing Peace Help rides or whatever the bike share?
That does exist. I don't know. Why don't I make a note to get that information, and it can be in a follow-up email with you all, just to be like, because I do know that we have the boundary, and I don't know it off the top of my head, but it is bigger than the Peace Health rides boundary. And that's one of the reasons for the scooter share, was to sort of create a equity connection, because it gets into further neighborhoods. So you could kind of use a scooter to get to the bike share, and then you could use the bike share to get somewhere. So
I saw the boundary today. It's you all have been working with me in my role at LTD. And it's basically the urban growth in Eugene. You can't go to Springfield, right? Springfield doesn't permit scooters, I guess. But yeah, it's basically, I mean, you can get almost down to LCC. You can get basically all the way up River Road. You can get anywhere. You can, I mean, I don't know the exact parking rules, but I was talking with folks, and like most places are going to be, right, like you can't like even into your front yard, I think, I assume. But like the intent was that this is everywhere, and it's not just downtown, because they've made equity areas, which I think is really cool on the city's part, where they're charging lower fees as a way to get these scooter companies to put them not just downtown. And so they should be more spread out.
There's also a low income program, so people who are eligible can get scooter memberships that are going to cost less.
And we're working on like, how do we get them to be near MX stations and stuff in West Eugene? And so we're, I think the city's been, my work, the city's been doing a really good job to fix a lot of the problems that we see in other.
You know, if you have a bike share membership, is that your membership for the e-scooters, or is it different?
That's a great question. I think it's going to be different.
And can there be a combo?
Yeah.
I think with our launch right now, I think since this is Super Pedestrian and Peace Health is through this, like, is a totally different thing. I think just like technology wise, they're not one app. But I think that's one of those things where maybe after the pilot, that becomes a major community concern. People are like, why are these different? It's confusing. And that's something we could approach or have as our feedback.
Yeah. Well, let's finish up here. I want to hear what's happening in Springfield. Tell me your name again.
Yeah, we're just actually, I'm new.
Yeah.
We have a lot of new folks on the committee.
Oh, this is your first year?
Well, just, yeah, beginning of the year, there was some turnover.
Yeah.
And so truth of it is, you know, I'm just kind of learning, and we're all learning, and we're just working on kind of coming up with some, you know, planning for this year, what we really want to focus on. So
Yeah. Tell us your name again.
I'm Keith Dickey, yeah.
Yeah. So Keith is replacing Bryce, or Bryce, I think you're gonna share it, sounds like.
Yeah, he may be involved too, but I'll be primary, yeah.
Yeah. Good, welcome.
Well, thank you. This is very interesting.
We all had a steep learning curve, or most of us.
Well, we're still making up the
Yeah.
rules.
Like drinking out of a fire hose.
That's right. And then I wanted to say about the sidewalk letter response, if you haven't had a chance to look at that Willow attached, make sure you do, because it got really good responses. They were really thoughtful, and it'd be great to debrief it in a meeting, actually, but they, we recommended or had some things, and they responded to it, and they're really listening, and so it's a really nice validating thing that they're, really working on it. So Sue and I, on behalf of all of us, sent kudos to Willow and to the, and an appreciation to the staff for their thoughtful response to that. So please make sure you get a chance to read that. Anything else?
I think moving forward, I'm hoping to respond to written letters in written form. I think it just seems so much more logical, because we had basically everything that was in that letter Rob had said, but it's so much different for it to be said in a meeting versus like being written out, because the original message was written as well. So I know that we have that other letter you sent about like ATC involvement, and I'm hoping to formulate a written response to that letter too, in kind of that same format where I can respond to things in the letter, just so it's clear kind of what we're thinking and how, how we're thinking about what you all have requested. So
yeah, thank you. Really appreciate that. Anything else?
Well, that was really educational for me. I didn't have any of the background on the sidewalk letter, so having that attached and having the responses, I learned a lot about that topic.
yeah, it's kind of
helpful.
interesting.
Yeah.
I do have, since we have like 2 minutes left, Franklin Boulevard Transformation Open House share back on here. And I just wanted to let everybody know that we had an open house for the Franklin Boulevard transformation at the beginning of February, and we had over 160 people attend, which is like by far our biggest open house we've had in a really long time. I think there's a thirst to kind of be involved in person with the city. So we got a lot of really great feedback for that, and the planners right now are kind of trying to figure out how to incorporate that feedback, and then Franklin is headed to the engineers to do like the actual design.
Must have been outreach too, to get that many people.
We did a lot. Yeah, we had radio ads and all sorts of things.
So did Larry Hirons.
Yeah. Yeah, also true. There were some angry people who showed up, but that is honestly good. Like a lot of people showed up misinformed. And I think they learned a lot about the project. So yeah.
I wanted to say too that our talk about the thing that John brought, it's good to have differing points of view. I think a lot of times we all agree, it's nice, refreshing sometimes, like, what, we don't really all agree on that, and that's really, I think I really respect, what the people said we didn't agree, because I'm not like 100% in, so it's important to hear all those differing voices. Anyway, we're adjourned.
Woo!
So how do we, is there a process for how we get that motion to the planning commission? Is there?
Yeah, let me ask, because it's not totally clear to me what you all are allowed to do with the planning commission. Like, I'm not sure if you are allowed to be like, us as ATC think planning commission should do this. I'm not 100% sure if you're allowed to do that.
And because, Mary and I discussed this afternoon, but I think, it seemed like, I understand